New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani now softening his tone slightly after using Citadel's Ken Griffin as an example of the type of person the city might want to hit with a wealth tax. Citadel fired back at the mayor, suggesting he could shelve a project in Midtown Manhattan. We've talked about it now. Joining us to discuss with the possible impact of Mayor Mamdani's plans, former White House Chief of Staff Bill Daley, who knows a thing or two about when Ken Griffin says one thing, what happens, because you know Chicago so well. Bill, what did you make of the way the mayor approached this, and what do you think the real implications are?
Well, look, there's no doubt the mayor ran on a platform that he was going to tax the wealthy, tax businesses, be very aggressive about that. Forgetting the fact of whether or not the tax is the right thing and it raises $500 million. The challenge for any mayor, and especially this mayor right now, is to live up to the promises of his campaign, but at the same time, maintain within a city like New York the business community to be involved to help solve the problems. Ken Griffin obviously creates jobs. He's extremely charitable in all the cities he's involved in. I may or may not agree with his politics all the way across the board, but to pick on Ken Griffin, who's a job creator, when you have so many other people similarly situated in that they own apartments in New York and they don't live there and they don't contribute there, I think it's a mistake for a Democratic mayor. But he ran on a tax. I'm going to tax everybody, tax the wealthy. So he's living up to that, and it's a challenge for Democrats, obviously.
Do you think, knowing what you know about Ken, that he would pull people from New York ultimately?
Well, look, it's very easy to move people around the country, move around the world, and Ken is committed to his business, and he's been very successful. But I wouldn't, if I was the mayor of New York, I wouldn't take a threat like that idly and say, well, he can't move. Yes, he can. Yes, he can put those. We saw it in Chicago. He moved to Florida. He left Illinois. He left Chicago. It's been a big hit to Chicago, not only from a business perspective, but also from a charitable and civic engagement, which is as important in many ways as the jobs businesses create. And that's a sensitive balance for a mayor to make sure he creates the climate that business people understand. Yes, they have to be taxed, but they don't want to be cited in a way that their business is bad or what they do is bad.
So, Bill, explain this then. I often tell people about Mayor Bloomberg, who, by the way, raised taxes on the wealthy by more than just about any mayor in the last, 20, 30 years. But did it mostly with everybody having a smile on their face. And I think that's in large part because people believe that he believed that he wanted them to be successesl. And so the question is why?
Yes.
Why do you think this mayor took this approach? I mean, as I said on the air a couple of days ago, it would be one thing to say, look, New York's open for business. We love having everybody here, whether you're a resident or non-resident alike, and we are now thrilled that everybody, no matter whether you're a resident or you're coming here as a pied-á-terre, are going to be contributing to our revenue base and making our city better. And leave it there rather than stand in front of a particular person's building and practically dox them.
Yeah, well, it's just his style. Obviously, he's a candidate that lives by social media, and now he's going to, in some ways, try to govern that way. It's very dangerous. Obviously, Mike Bloomberg was one of the most successful business people in America, became mayor. There was a confidence by the business community of him and about him because they knew him. Mamdani has been mayor and really came on the scene in the last 18 months, like very few politicians come on the scene so quickly, without any background and relationships in business. And when you run on the platform of sounding anti-business, anti-wealthy, and then you begin to complain that the business community isn't engaged with you, that you've got to reach out to business people and convince them. Yes, you may be different in your politics, how you treat the wealthy or treat business, but you want to engage with them. There's a $10 billion deficit in New York. Even this little tax, $500 million on those who don't live there but have apartments there, isn't going to solve the problem. So reaching out to the business community and trying to engage with them to solve the problems is more beneficial, in my opinion, long term, than just trying to get a good news story or clicks on social media one day.
Bill, the other piece of about all of this is, do you think that he can ultimately raise taxes and should raise taxes this way? There was a fascinating piece in the New York Times over the weekend that looked at a very similar plan that took place. Actually, we've seen it now live, the natural experiment in London. And while there are some factors that might have converged at the same time, that real estate market took a real hit after the pied-à-terre tax took place, and there seemed to be a real trickle-down effect.
Well, I think you should expect that. The mayor should expect that. Look, New York is unique because you have people from all over the world who have apartments there, who don't live there, and just like the vibrancy and may show up once a year. But I don't think there's any question that one would have to expect that there will be an impact on those non-occupied apartments that people have owned at a very high price. I lived in New York for 5 years. There's no place like it in the U.S. as far as cost. So I think they should expect that. So whether or not they actually raise the $500 million or not is a whole other question. Let me also say, as one of the leading Democrats, Mamdani, last week, for the first time maybe in my lifetime, the research polling showed that Democrats were viewed more favorably about the economy than Republicans. But there's a balance there all the time that Democrats have to not come across as anti-business or anti-business people, especially job creators, just speaking on behalf of those in need who need more tax revenue, I guess. So I think that's a balance that Mamdani's got to be careful with. He may not need to be careful with that on his politics in the Social Democratic Party, but for Democrats generally, it has been a very difficult issue for Democrats historically around the economy and being viewed more favorably dealing with the economy than Republicans.